This conference will now be recorded.
All right, hi, my name is Stephen Roth and I'm with CornellSoft. And today I will be demoing the HVAC ResLoad-J app. And this app allows users like you to perform field-based HVAC heating and cooling load calculations for residential and light commercial buildings. So today I will be walking through this app, showing all the features and functionality. In addition, I will be showing you a new feature that we have just added to the app, and it's called the HVAC ResLoad-J Cloud. And basically what that means in a nutshell is you can now store all of your projects in the cloud, meaning in a remote database, not only for backup purposes, but also to be able to share with other technicians and users within your organization. And also, if you happen to have multiple devices that you use this app, you can load those projects onto multiple devices and be able to share them and update them. So this is a brand new feature we just released last week, and I will be showing you that also. All right, so let's get started. So what you see on your screen here is what we call an emulator, and it allows us to do demos just like this, but also test the software. And it looks exactly like your iPad screen. So we're actually going to be demoing in landscape mode, as you can see here. You can also use the app in portrait mode, but landscape mode is probably the better mode just because you get to see more on the screen. And it's also a better way to demo the app. So what you're looking at here is the home screen. So on the left is a list of all your projects. On the right are the inputs associated with the projects. And there are a couple modes here to work in. Up here you see where it says block load and room by room. So block load means that you're treating the home as one big block. You're not as much worried about what's inside in terms of the construction. And that's how basically you size your equipment. Once you've entered all your information for your block load, then you can go into the room by room and start adding individual rooms. And the reason you want to do this is to be able to determine airflows for each room, so you can size ductwork and diffusers. So you can actually get away with just doing a block load if you're sizing equipment. But if you want to get more granular and detailed, you can do room by room. So within each mode here, block load and room by room, you have these 4 tabs here, sub-tabs, buttons: project, envelope, window, and skylight. So under Blockload Project, you have your main project information, and you can access it by swiping from right to left. Your envelope button or tab allows you to enter all the information about roof, walls, doors, ceilings, floors. Your window tab obviously allows you to enter all the information about windows and glass doors, and finally your skylight. And I'll be going through all these in more detail. All right, so let's talk about Blockload Project. So as I mentioned, on the left here is a list of all your projects. And for the sake of time, we're not going to create a new project. We're going to use an existing project. You can create new projects by clicking the plus button here. And that pops a form, and you can create a new project. So type in the project name, click save, and it will actually just create a blank project with a default window, door. Oh, I'm sorry, default window, default wall. Or you can actually copy from an existing project, which is a really popular feature because you can create your own template and copy that template over and over again into new projects. So in other words, it saves you time, lots of time. You don't have to re-enter the same data over and over again, especially if you are using or if you are servicing homes that are similar in construction. Like I said, for the sake of time, I'm not going to create a new project. I'm going to select an existing project. Now, you'll notice that some of the projects are, the text are black, and some of the projects, the text is more of a maroon color. And this is new because this basically means
this deals with the ResLoad-J Cloud. And I'm going to explain that a little later, but in a nutshell, what it means is any projects where the text, the project name is in a black color, means that you own that project. So you can edit that project, and once you sync, it will send it over to the cloud, and when someone else syncs and they bring that project over to their device, they will see the exact same information. Any projects that are maroon in color means that you can view that project, however, and you can also edit it locally, but once you sync, it will not send that information over to the cloud. So in other words, you can, it's basically read-only, even though you can edit it locally. But suppose someone else edits that project who does own it, and you sync that, then it will overwrite your changes. So if indeed, for example, this Ross residence here, if you wanted to create your own version of it, you can just create a new project and copy from it. You have your own version of it that you would own, and you can edit it, sync it, and to the cloud, and then anyone else who shares that project would receive it. So that's what the difference is. Like I said, I'll go into that in a bit more detail when we talk about the syncing or the ResLoad-J Cloud functionality. All right, so I selected a project, and then on the right are my inputs. So these are basic demographic inputs. Probably the most important input in this section is the city. I click it, it pops up my weather data, and I can select, any state and any city within that state, and it will populate the weather data for that city. So if your exact city is not located in this list, you could try to select the city that's most closely aligned to it or most near it. And in fact, you can also map it. So if you click map, and it will actually pop up a Google Map. It will show push pins of the different locations in the database, and you can select the push pin, and it will then populate it with the city that you selected. So a nice little feature there. Also, you can override this weather data too. So if you think, oh, you know what, I think it should be 95 degrees, you can always go in there, override it, and it will override it for the specific project. All right. So let's scroll down here, and here I can enter my total floor area of my home, the amount of floor area I'm actually cooling, and the amount I'm heating. So you'll notice there's a couple ways to enter values here. You can slide your slider, and as you slide it, the values increase and decrease. You can also put your finger inside the text box, and up will pop the keyboard, which I will show you in 1 second. There we go. And you can type in a value there. Now you'll notice that this value is maroon, meaning that it is calculated or derived. So most of the time you're going to heat the same amount of area that you're going to cool. So this value is actually derived from this. As you can see, they move in tandem. However, you can always override this. Suppose you happen to heat less of the house than you cool, you can always just enter a different value, and you'll notice that it is now black text, meaning that it's no longer derived. So each moves independently. You want it to go back to being in tandem, just delete all the way, click done, and now they'll be in tandem again. Here you enter your average room height, and really what happens here is it multiplies the cooling floor area by your height to get the volume of your home, and that's used to calculate ventilation loads and infiltration loads, which we'll talk about in a bit. Here you enter the number of bedrooms, and based on the number of bedrooms, it adds 1 to the number of occupants. And this will calculate sensible lane load for people. Down here is your appliance list. So what are your appliance lists? Well, they can be low, 1200 BTU per hour, all the way to custom. Custom allows you to enter a very detailed list of all the appliances in your home, anything that is adding heat to your house. So if I click this little caret icon, up pops the form, allows me to start entering, inputting, and adding appliances. So as you can see here, I have a couple already, a television, computers. I can click the plus button, click the caret here, and you can see there's a whole list of pre-populated appliances. So let me add a dishwasher. And we only have one. And you can see here that this is the sensible latent load for that dishwasher, and we're assuming it's really only used 25% of the time, so it will multiply these values accordingly down to 1,000 sensible, 358 per hour. And you can add as many appliances as you want. And we'll add it all up and give you a value here. And this is your appliance load of 6,000 BTU per hour. So here on the right is a pie chart that updates dynamically as you change your values. And here are my cooling loads. It's a breakdown of my cooling loads. It's a great way to see how, what is affecting my cooling loads the most. Well, in this case, it's my indoor, as you can see. And then heating shows you my heating loads. And then we have what's called an AAD curve, an adequate excursion diversity curve. This is a requirement of Manual J8 ACCA. Oh yeah, and I did fail to mention that. All these calculations are based on ACCA Manual J8. And in fact, this app is approved by ACCA. So I just want to make sure to mention that. That's important, especially if you're submitting new reports to your local municipality or state. Often they do require approved ACCA Manual J8 reports, which these do produce. So the AAD curve plots your cooling load all the way from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And as you can see, it increases and then peaks in the early afternoon, then decreases. And this is pretty typical, right? Now the thing is, if this peak goes above this orangish kind of yellowish line here, basically what it's telling you is that you probably need to install a VAV system in that home because it is not adequately diverse. In other words, there's, in the morning, there's going to be way too much load, in the afternoon, there's going to be way too much load. You're going to have to kind of almost install two different systems or install the VAV system so you can adequately cool that home throughout the entire day. However, if that peak is below this orangish yellow line, then you're okay. You can install a constant volume system. Hopefully that's clear. All right, I'm going to swipe right to left, and now here's a whole new set of inputs. I'm not going to go through all of these because this would go over the hour that we have here, but I'll go through the highlights. So you can set your set point for cooling. I have it 75, and as I slide my slider, you can see how it affects my cooling on the right there in that pie chart. Pretty cool. Same thing with heating. My heating set point, and then indoor relative humidity will affect certain aspects of my cooling load. Down here, I define my construction tightness. Is it a tight building, meaning that it's a newer building that is tight, good double pane windows, lots of weatherization, caulking, and all that? Or is it kind of average, or is it a loose home that has not been weatherized or updated in 30, 40 years? Let's assume it's average. Infiltration. So infiltration is any air that comes into your home, forced through your home, either through leaky windows or doors. And it does have an effect on your cooling and heating loads. So there are three methods of infiltration. I'm going to talk about just one of them, the manual J air change method. Excuse me. The input here is what type of home is it, 3 or 4 exposure, single, 2-story, or townhouse. And then the construction tightness came from my previous input and automatically calculates your total airflow, or your CFM of airflow of infiltration. And you can do the same thing for heating. The only difference in heating is you're adding your fireplace. During the winter, a lot more wind out there, and that wind can come down through the flue and into your home via the fireplace. So you do want to specify a fireplace and also the tightness of that fireplace. And once you have that, it will calculate your infiltration, which in this case is pretty modest, 1,700 BTU per hour. All right, let's go to ventilation. So ventilation needs to be calculated automatically, 83 CFM. You want to calculate your ventilation load. Or if you don't have any ventilation, that means outside air coming in through your furnace, you can, to command, you want to enter a value of 0. So it really depends. Or you can override that to a value that you think it should be. All right, let's skip down to Duct. So this is by no means a manual D program. There are separate software tools out there that perform manual D calculations, but we still need to model the basic version of the Duct system, just so we can get the heating and cooling loads due to any duct air leakage And that's really important, especially if the duct system is in an unconditioned, is not insulated, and it's in an unconditioned part of your home. It could pick up a lot of heat or pick up a lot of cooling and really affect your load. So here we've already, you can add up to 5 different systems. Here we have one system selected. Let's look at our supply system. And here's a bunch of inputs for that supply system, including the location of that duct, the duct system, radial or trunk, branch, duct configuration, the ceiling type, if it's a single story. And these values, these numbers here are ACCA table, come from ACCA tables, Manual J8 tables. What's the R value of the insulation around the duct? What's your duct leakage? Is it average? Is it really leaky? Or is it sealed and tested? Obviously, the more sealed and tested, the less leakage. Then based on your floor area, you'll take 18% of your floor area and calculate your duct surface area. So you may want to override this. This could be a very high value. So if I go back and click done, you'll see that my duct load is, lower heat gain is minimal. So duct load is almost, a ton and a half, ton and 3/4. That's pretty significant. So you may want to lower that. A lot of people get confused by this. Why is my duct load, cooling load so high? Well, you really need to pay attention. So you may want to lower the surface area of the duct. Let's lower it to say half of that. And it should have pretty much have your load down to 10,000 now. A little more reasonable, still a little high almost a ton, but you'll want to play with that. Make sure you get that right. And you also can model your return system. If you happen to have one, it's not a plan. If you don't have a return system, just enter a value of 1 here, and that pretty much negates your return loads. But it is important to model your duct system because it can contribute a lot to your heating and cooling. All right, let's move on. So down here, just some checks and values show you very quickly what your load component is so far due to system loads only, not your total, but your system. For cooling and heating, there's your block load, which is the same here, heating load, block cooling, block heating, and your airflow. So as I mentioned, you always up to date on what your total cooling load is, what your airflow is, what your total heating load is. So I'm going to swipe again right to left, and this is just a quick way for me to see a very detailed breakdown on my cooling and heating loads, including percentages. And this screen is elsewhere in the app too. All right. So now that we've covered the project, let's move on to envelope. So now we're still dealing with our block load. So when we talk about envelope, we're really dealing with any elements that are, a component of the block, pretty much outside, or anything that where there's heat loss going across it, like a partition between your basement and your living room, or maybe a ceiling that's underneath an unconditioned attic. So that's what we're really dealing with here when we're talking about our block load envelope components. So here we have a bunch of them already. You can add as many as you want. You can also copy. So you happen to have a bunch of, say, above grade walls that are similar, but maybe their orientations a bit different. You can add those and then just change the orientation for each new one. So let's look at an above grade wall here. So here we have an above grade wall. And here you can select the type of envelope. Here we select the above grade wall. The orientation, let's change that to south. Construction numbers. So this construction list comes from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook, and there's hundreds of construction types: the walls, roofs, doors, floors, windows, etc. So here we have frame wall. We can go through this whole list and select the wall that's most, closest to the wall that we're modeling, and it shows you the U values, which is one of the R value. Click done, and it auto fills in your U value here, along with what's called a CLTD, a cooling load temperature difference value, which is basically dealing with solar component. So you can override these values if you want, or just leave them. Here you enter the wall width, and obviously it's a little exaggerated, so I'm going to lower that. And wall height. And you multiply the two together to get your area. Here is the load due to that, cooling load to that wall, heating load to that wall. And then here's your total block cooling. Let's look at a ceiling. So once again, if you want a ceiling, you go to envelope panel type, select ceiling. The ceiling, you would specify the direction it's facing, if it's slanted or sloped. Construction number of this. So once again, all of these constructions come from the ACCA Manual J8 handbook. Autofills in your U value. You can enter the ceiling length and width to get your total area. I'm going to change that a little bit. There we go. Floor. Floor mainly is a heating component, not a cooling component, since floors are often in contact with your grade. Coolness of the grade or the coldness will transfer to your floor, so it's mainly for heating. Here's another above grade wall. So once we've defined all our envelopes, we now go to our window. And same thing, window, you can add as many windows as you want, click the plus button, copy existing windows or create new ones. And what we do here is you attach your windows to the walls that you defined in the envelope section of the. So for example, here I have my west window. And I attached to walls. So here's a list of all the walls I defined under the envelope section. I attached to my west wall. And what that does is it not only assigns the orientation to that window, which is very important for calculating the solar load, but it also subtracts out the area of that window from that wall. So you get a true load calculation. It doesn't double count, in other words. Construction number, I can select from ACCA Manual J8 construction types for windows, including single, double, and triple pane. What's the frame of my window? Based on that, it autofills in my U value and my solar heat gain coefficient value. As you can see, these are maroon values, so they're derived, but you can override those. You know for sure there's a sticker on that Anderson window that you have that shows the R value or U value and the SHEC. You can insert those manually. What's the type of window? Default, bay, or garden. Then if you happen to have multiple windows on that wall, you can enter the area of one of them and then enter the quantity. All it does here multiplies this value times that value. So a really important part of windows for cooling loads is the shading. Because if you do have shading, it's going to lower that solar component pretty dramatically. So here you can select internal shading, meaning shades, lines, drapes, and what percentage of the window is being covered by that internal shading. Then you can specify an insect screen, whether it's internal or external. Down here, you have a sunscreen. What type of sunscreen it is. If you don't have a sunscreen, just click no sunscreen. And then autofills in the coefficient, which you can override, and what percentage of that window is being covered by the sunscreen. And then over here, you can model your external or exterior shading, meaning an overhang. So here you would enter the height of your window, the overhang length, and the distance above the window that the overhang is located. You can also input the ground reflectance here. So basically, if your home is surrounded by grass, it's not going to reflect as much heat onto your home as if it were surrounded by asphalt. And then down here, it shows you the cooling and heating load contributions you did this window. And you do the same thing for all your windows. All right, move to skylight. So skylight is just a window on your roof, right? So once again, you can add as many skylights as you want. And you can assign that skylight to a ceiling that you define under your envelope. So once again, it will subtract out the area of that skylight from the envelope. What's the construction of that skylight? Double, triple, or single, double, triple pane. Type of curve. It will auto fill in the U value and SHEC, which I can override. You can enter the area of the skylight, and if you can also enter the quantity. There's more than one. Here's your load for cooling and heating. Do that skylight, and you can, like I said, you can add as many as you want. So we've defined all of the envelopes, windows, skylights, and basic project information for our block load. So now we're ready to look at some reports. We know what our total cooling and heating load is in our airflow. Let's look at that in a little bit more detail. You can also share these reports. So here's a list of reports. Let's look at our system reports. So these are the reports that you can view on your screen. You can also air print them, send them to a printer directly, or you can also email them as PDFs to anyone you want. Here's the cover page. This is a checksum report, kind of just shows you lots of rule of thumb values. It's for heating. Here's our cooling load breakdown along with percentages. Here's for heating. And here's the pie charts. So a lot of reports, and oh yeah, AD curves. So you can, like I said, print these reports, email them as PDFs. Go back to reports. You can also print individual room reports, which I'm going to show you in a bit. And then input reports. This is a new feature, about 6 months old. You can actually print out all of the inputs that you inputted into this project. And people like to see this, especially, municipalities, they want to see what you inputted. So it's a great way to do that. So here are all my project inputs, my envelope inputs, it's like my individual envelopes, or all of them. And once again, you can air print them or email them to anyone you want as a PDF. Window door inputs, skylight, room inputs. So once again, you can print all the inputs and all the inputs out, not only the outputs. All right, email HTML report. So this, and I can't show you this on the emulator since the emulator doesn't have email functionality. But basically what it does is opens your email client and it actually attaches an Excel file, a CSV file, which allows you to open it in Excel. And it's just another way to get information out and into, say, Excel. So you can create your own custom reports. All right, let's talk about the I button. The I button is kind of a settings or preferences form. So if you happen to be working in Canada, French Quebec, or Mexico, you can switch to metric units. And down here, people get confused with this. They think these are like the values you enter to specify the area of your home or whatever, but you don't. These values are here only to specify the maximum value on your slider control for different sliders. So here, floor area, what's the maximum value? You go back to our project, you can see in the maximum value is 10,000. Well, suppose I have a humongous house I want to model. Well, let me change my max to 25,000. Actually, house is bigger than that, but so now your max is 25,000, and you can go as high as you want. So all that does is changes your max values on your slide controls for your floor, for openings, windows, for dimensions, which is for like your height and width of your walls, etc. And then down here, you can enter your company information, and this information is printed on the reports. I'll talk about the user management here when we talk about the cloud, because this is your login credentials, which, like I said, I'll talk about in a bit. The question mark button is help. This is online help, fully documented, and it also includes links to previous videos that we've recorded. The calculator button here just performs a calculation, so maybe some of the values are old or not, and you can click this to recalculate it. All right, so let's move to room by room. So as I mentioned, you first do your block load. That's what this app is all about. You're out in the field, you want to do something relatively quickly, you want to size out equipment. You're going to do that in the block load mode. However, if you want to get more detailed and granular, you want to move on to the room by room mode. But always remember, first do block load no matter what, because the block load is where you define all your constructions. And once you define all these constructions, you can use them in the room by room, which I'm going to show you right now. So click room by room. And in fact, we don't have rooms in this project. So I'm going to move on to another project where we do have rooms, just so we can save time. So here we have a bunch of rooms. So I can add rooms just like I can add projects and windows and doors and floors and envelopes. I can add a new room, or I can copy an existing room. So you have a couple bedrooms that are pretty similar, you know, on the same orientation, same area. You can copy those. You don't have to re-enter the data over and over again. Okay, so I have my office. I can enter the number of occupants in that office, so that, you know, if I enter one, then it'll, you know, add in my sensible latent for one person. And here I can start assigning those appliances that I defined in my Blockload section to my individual rooms. So if you remember, let's go back to Blockload. And I know that we worked with Connor House, but this one also, actually, let's look at Connor House. So you see that I added a bunch of, excuse me, appliances. Well, now I can start assigning these appliances to individual rooms, and it will add in those sensible latent loads to those individual rooms. So let me look at a project where, yes, okay, so this one actually does have appliances. So let's go to room by room. Let's look at office. Let's go in here and for a second. Oh, I have to refresh that. Okay, I'm going to add a couple of appliances really quick to this project. I'm going to add computer. Let me add 5 computers. Seems like these days everyone has multiple computers. So we have a 2,700 BTU per hour internal load, sensible. So now let's go to room by room. Let's go to office. And now what I want to do is I want to assign 2 of those computers to this office. So I'm going to click 2. It shows me that I have 5, right? I'm going to click 2. Now that I've entered 2, it shows me that I have 3 computers left. So this kind of keeps a tally of how many appliances I have left. You can actually go above and beyond this number. This is just for reference purposes. So now I've assigned 2 computers to my office. And you'll see now that it adds in an internal load of 1,500 BTU per hour. That includes my appliances, which is my computers, and also that one person, which is around 200 BTU per hour. So it adds those and gets my internal load. And you can do that for all the rooms. You can add as many appliances to each room as you want. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go to envelope. So now here I start defining the above grade walls, ceilings, floors that are applicable to that specific room. In other words, our office. Now, if you're ever deep in the weeds here, like we're in our room by room envelope, and you're not sure, hey, wait, which project am I in and which room am I in? You can always reference this up here. So I'm in the Ross Residence S1 project, I'm in my office. So here, let's look at west wall. So what I'm going to do here, and once again, you can add as many envelopes as you want, you can copy as many as you want, just like all of the others. Now, what I'm going to do here is it's actually going to list all of the constructions that I defined in my Blockload, all the envelopes. And it allows me to select, say, the west wall here. Then I can enter the area of that west wall that applies to this office. So I enter 220 square feet. Once again, it keeps a running tally. So remember, let's go back to our west wall here. We have a total of 440 square feet. It's going to keep a running tally of how much of that west wall I've used throughout all my rooms. Once again, you can go over this. So if this goes down to 0, you can still enter as high a value. This is just for reference purposes. All right, so I can do the same thing with the north wall for this room, for my office. A floor. Selected the passive slab, which I defined in my Blockload. And finally, a ceiling, which I also defined in my Blockload. And I have the area, and here is my total load. Due to my envelopes. Same thing with windows. I can add as many windows as I want, and I can select the windows that I find in my Blockload and apply them to the specific office. So here's my west window. I'm going to select the west facing window that I defined within my Blockload. I'm going to enter the area of the window that applies to this office, and it will calculate the total load, cooling heat. Same thing with my north window. And once again, skylight. There's no skylight in my office, so there's nothing. So you can see the theme here. For my room by room, I'm basically taking the instructions that I defined in my block load, applying them to my specific room, and entering the area that applies to that specific. And then it will calculate a total cooling and heating load for my room. In this case, my cooling load is 4,200 BTU per hour, heating is 7,300. Also shows me an AED curve, which I'm going to put that calculator, it kind of calculates it. And you can see here, my AED curve is a lot different than the AED curve for my home. If you think about it, rooms are going to have drastically different AED curves. Because some rooms face east, so their peaks are going to be in the morning. Other rooms face west, so their peaks are going to be later in the afternoon. So once again, this kind of shows you some interesting behavior, cooling and heating load behavior of specific rooms in your home. You can see this room kind of peaks in the morning and then drops off. But you'll see other rooms a lot different. See how these AED curves drastically vary? All right, so we've defined the loads for this office, and we can go ahead and define the loads for all of the rooms in our home. And one thing I do want to make sure that you understand is that the total cooling load of all your rooms and the total heating load of all your rooms will never equal your block load. If they do, it's a total coincidence. Because what happens is your rooms peak at different times of the day. So in fact, if you model it correctly, the total of all your rooms will probably be greater than your block load, which is the case the way it should be. Just to make sure, some people get confused. They're thinking, wait, why is my total of my room load not equal to my block load? Well, it shouldn't be. And if it is, it's a coincidence. So now let's go into reporting. So if you remember, we have room reports here. So we can select a room, display a report, pie charts. We can send it to AirPrint, send it to email it as a PDF. We can do that for each individual room. We can also do it for all our rooms. Also within my system report, if I scroll from right to left here, I'll see a room by room report, a nice concise report here. And then same thing with inputs, my room inputs. So lots of reporting. All right, so we've gone through the basics of this app, both the block load and room by room sections. Now let's talk about this new feature that we just released last week called the HVAC ResLoad-J Cloud. And as I mentioned before, it basically allows you to store your projects in the cloud, not only for backup purposes, but also to be able to share your project with other technicians within your organization, and also with other devices that you may have. So you may have two iPads, and you want to be able to share a project between those two iPads, where you can do that. So how does it work exactly? Well, when you first install the app, you will not be connected to the cloud. You need to either log in or register. So if this is your first time, obviously you'll be registering. If you've used what's called our HVAC Equipment Locator app, which allows you to keep track of all your equipment, you can use the same credentials as that to log in. And so if you do register, I'm not going to show it here, but if you do register, you register your email, password, it will send you an email to confirm that your email is legitimate. You click the link in that email, and once you're confirmed, then you will be able to log in. And once you log in, you'll be able to start syncing. And the way you sync is you just click this little round icon here. Click that, it will pop up a sync pop-up and show you that it's syncing, and it's going to send your projects over to the cloud. So the way we work in terms of different tiers of syncing, you can sync for free 2 projects. Anything beyond 2, we do start charging different fees. So you can sync 2 projects initially just to see how it works. All right, well, that wasn't too exciting. It's like, okay, it's synced. Now what happens? Well, now there's a cloud or there's a web site portion that we need to look into. And this is where you can view the projects that you've synced, and you can also assign them to other users. But before we move on to the website, I do want to show you another thing. This is new also to the app. This is a sorting feature. So this allows you to sort your projects by 3 different parameters. Your last updated date, meaning the last time you actually worked with the project, or the creation date, in other words, when you actually created the project, or the project name. So for example, if I want to sort by project name, I sort by this. Now you'll notice that it didn't sort these guys. These projects down here at the bottom, they're not only maroon, but they're also our default projects. These are the projects that came with the app that you installed. Since most of the time, these are just kind of for learning and reference purposes, we just keep these at the bottom all the time. So they are not included in the sort, just to make sure you understand. Last updated date, so when's the last time I worked with the app, the project, and creation date, when did I actually create the project? All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the cloud portion of the website. So I am going to switch screens here. Okay, so now you should see the browser. And the URL for the ResLoad-J Cloud is the same as our equipment locator website called Carmel Equip Locator. So if you're not quite sure how to find that, you can always go to our carmelsoft.com, our homepage website. Click down here, Equipment Locator Cloud, click Sign In, and it comes up, Carmel Equipment Locator. Now we're going to log in as the same user that I logged in on my iPad, Stephen Roth +95. All right, so for those of you who are familiar with the HVAC Equipment Locator, this will look very familiar because if you happen to have been using the Equipment Locator app, you can click building this and you'll see a list of all your buildings and equipment and maintenance. But we've also added a new menu option for the ResLoad-J project list. So this is what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to click here, and here is a list of those 3 projects, remember, from the iPad app that they're now in the cloud. So as I mentioned before, those default projects that come pre-installed with the app, those are not synced to the cloud. Because like I said, those are for learning purposes only. So we're not going to waste resources syncing those to the cloud, since most of the time you're not going to need those. If you want to use those default projects, just copy it. You can actually copy the default project to a new project. And then now that new project will be considered a project that is able to be synced to the cloud. So that's all you need to do. So that's why we're only looking at those 3 projects here. So I'm going to go into the Rose Home. And basically what this interface allows you to do is allows you to assign your project to other users within your organization. So these happen to be all users within my organization. So as you can see, I have not shared this project, the Rose Home, yet, but if I want to, I can share it with Stephen Roth 94. Click yes, click save. And then now what's going to happen is Stephen Roth 94 on his device, the next time he syncs, he is going to receive the Rose Home. We'll be able to view it on his iPad. However, if you remember what I talked about before, when he receives that project on his iPad, it will be the title, the name of the project will be in maroon color, telling him that he does not own that project, meaning that any updates that he makes locally on his device will not be synced to the cloud. And in fact, the next time Stephen Roth 95 makes an update, and then Stephen Roth 94 syncs, his changes will be overridden. The reason for this is we do not want people overwriting each other's changes on the same project, because that will cause mass confusion. So in other words, only one person can own a project, or in other words, edit a project at a time. The only time that doesn't happen is if you are logged into multiple devices and you're sharing your project on those multiple devices. So suppose Stephen Roth 95 is logged into multiple iPads and I'm syncing between those. Since I'm logged into those multiple devices, I own that project, I'm able to edit that project on those multiple devices. So you need to be a little careful on, when you sync and when you sync from one device to the other. That's the only caveat. All right, so and also you'll notice that Steam 1195 is only a technician. Meanwhile, there's an administrator, Steam 1191. So the administrator is usually the first person to log in for a company, and he gets a user ID, a company ID, and that company ID he can share with other users, other technicians, so as to make sure that you're all a part of the same company. So in other words, you can only share projects with other people within your company only, and only people that have been approved. You cannot share your projects with people outside your company, and that's for obvious security reasons. All right, so that's kind of the basics of the syncing functionality. And there's a lot more detail on the HVAC ResLoad-J Cloud on our website. So if I go back to our homepage, and in fact, just click this banner there, you're going to see that there's a whole web page that explains in excruciating detail on exactly how the HVAC ResLoad-J Cloud works. And it goes step by step for every feature and includes screenshots. So you can really get a great understanding of how the syncing functionality works and how the interaction between administrators and technicians work, how you register and log in, syncing. It explains the difference between projects that have a black type text versus the maroon text. You can also delete projects. And just remember, if you delete a maroon project, meaning a project you don't own, all it does is unassigns it from you. It does not delete it for good because the owner still has access to that project. So this section explains that in detail. Sorting of projects, and finally security. So, obviously these days security is of utmost importance. So everything requires, authentication. Everything is transmitted over SSL encryption. All the data is stored on Microsoft Azure servers, which are highly scalable and highly protected and safe and secure. So pretty much we've taken all the possible security measures that you can. In addition, the Carmel Equipment Locator site is protected by Cloudflare, which is a service that, a DNS protection service that helps prevent denial of service attacks and phishing and spoofing and all the crazy hacking attempts being tried out there. So it's very secure. All right, so let's go back to the app. All right, so now we're back to the app, and we've gone over the basics of how to use this app in terms of calculating cooling and heat loads for your home. We talked about this new syncing functionality, or the cloud functionality that allows you to send your projects over to the cloud, share them with other authorized users. Also built into HVAC ResLoad-J, I talked about this a bit, is the equipment locator. So the equipment locator app is a whole nother app. It's also a standalone. Allows you to keep track of all your equipment. And you can, once again, sync this to the cloud, save it, share it with other users. And that's a whole nother webinar. All right, so I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover today, discussing the HVAC ResLoad-J app in addition to the new cloud functionality. So if you do have any questions, feel free to email me at sroth, S-R-O-T-H, @carmelsoft.com. And have a great day.